years experience with established several complementary programs to facilitate peace and calm in her patients, as well as in families and, the work ethics, employees, with everyone to help be able to find that inner peace. Identifying the need to further assist staff in stress reduction, she expanded her training to include mindfulness-based stress reduction, MSBR, since 2017. Teri has been providing training to staff and community members to recognize and reduce stress through mindfulness. So as you know, she comes with a well-worth background of extensive training, and we are so delighted and excited that she's part of our team and that she can facilitate these wonderful programs in our community as well as into the community partners. So without further ado, I'd like to introduce Teri Schmitchen.
Good afternoon, everyone, and thank you so much, Bea, for those kind words. So today we're just going to start out by asking you to just take this time and really focus on yourself. We are going to ask you to silence your phone so that you can just learn to step away from multitasking, because that is our demand through every part of the day. We're going to be talking about different variations of mindfulness, and probably many of you have heard this term thrown around, especially since COVID, as all of us are seeking different ways to help reduce our stress. So I'm going to go ahead and share my screen here. And Bea, I'm just going to ask if it's showing up correctly. Good. Okay. All right. So we're going to start out with, well, what is mindfulness? And there's a very specific definition for mindfulness. It is about paying attention to our lives moment by moment in a certain way and without judgment. And that last part is key. We'll talk about why that is in just a little bit. And the basis of all mindfulness programs is the mindfulness-based stress reduction, which is established and was established in 1979 by Jon Kabat-Zinn. So that's kind of the foundational teaching for these mindfulness programs. So I'm going to take a moment and just ask you to kind of fall into yourself. Just kind of fall into your own breath and its natural rhythm, breathing in and out. And as you do that, I want you to think about what your stress level is right now on a scale of 1 to 5, with 5 being the most stressed and 1 being very relaxed and Zen-like. So if you could go ahead and just put in a number in the chat box there. And while we're waiting for the participants to do that, we can just continue to follow our breath in and out. And in and out. Jennifer, I'll ask if you can just read out to me because I cannot see the chat. If you could just read out to me.
Sure. So far, we've had as high as a 6 come in,
Wow, yeah.
and as low as a 2, and everything in between.
Okay. All right. So our goal for today is to help you reduce that number by 1 point.
Teri,
So
we just had a 7 come in also.
Okay. So a lot of stressors, and this is definitely, it's not surprising that we're finding people in that state. So as we go through this presentation, some of this teaching might be new to you. Some of it may be extreme in nature, maybe a new way of thinking for you. So what we really encourage you to do is kind of create a cultivator, a beginner's mind, kind of like when you're going in to learn maybe a new task or a new role or a new sport or a new skill, that beginner's sort of mind where curiosity is right at the forefront of that. And some of the activities as we go through, because this is experiential, might be a little bit uncomfortable. And I just encourage you to do what is most comfortable for you as we go through the presentation. So when we think about mindfulness, we talk about, oops, hold on just a second. How do we put it into practice? Well, there's formal practices, and that's such as meditation, yoga, Tai Chi, walking meditation, or loving kindness. So if I can ask participants to indicate in the chat box if you participate in any of those formal practices of mindfulness. You may not be specifically referring to it as mindfulness, but it's going to be an underlying component to any of those formal practices. Again, meditation, yoga, Tai Chi, any of those types of practices. And while we're waiting for those results to come in, just going to rest to our breath.
We have meditation, yoga, exercise in general, reflection, deep breathing, prayer, meditation.
And I often have folks tell me that they are a failed meditator. I think that when we think about meditation, the first thing that might come to our mind is, the Buddhist monk perched atop a mountaintop, with his legs crossed and his fingers up, and just in this state of Zen and peace, without a single thought crossing through his mind. And what even Buddhist monks and monks who have been practicing meditation for many, many years will tell you, that the thoughts come. The trick is to not engage the thought. And we're going to learn some techniques on how to do that. And keep in mind and be gentle with yourself. If you are doing any of these practices and you find that, your thoughts continue to distract your growth of the practice or during it, that's okay. That's 100% normal. Just allow the thoughts to come in and then allow them to float by. So just know, though, that it's in our making that our minds are wanderers. That's how we kept safe for millennial. We have a wandering mind that's constantly searching for threats and assessing what those threats are. So not being able to clear our minds completely and quiet our thoughts, especially when you lay down at night to sleep, that is very, very natural. But we'll learn some techniques today on how to get through that. But
Teri,
some of the other, yes, I'm sorry.
There's been several more wonderful things coming through. Everything from music, hiking, walking the dogs, art medicine, oracle writing, stretching, working on mindfulness projects with residents.
That's fantastic.
Collage.
Such a creative way that folks are kind of getting out of their thoughts and into a physical type of practice. And that's really what mindfulness is. It's about getting us out of our thoughts and anchoring us in our body. And we do that, and we can do that every day and every moment. We can do that right now. Just doing informal practices that you do every day. Think about your morning routine. When you woke up this morning, I would imagine that, many of you took a shower, doing mindfulness in the shower, such as just noticing the warm water as it's coming down your shoulders, the smell of the shampoo, the feel of the soap as it lathers in your fingers. Just paying attention to those very, very minute moments, keying in and engaging your sensory perceptions about that. So we do know, and you've even said that your stress even exceeds the scale that we talked about today. But what happens in our body with the stress? What does that impact? Well, it impacts our major body systems. And I believe that the majority of our audience here works in healthcare. So when I asked you about giving or assigning that number, that stress number, how did you know? How does that stress appear in your body? How do you know that you're stressed? So if you could enter into the chat, what are some of the sensations or experiences, feelings, emotions? How do you know that you are under stress? How does that present for you?
We have heart racing, trouble sleeping, hard to breathe, irritable, restless, shoulders feel heavy, weight loss, nausea, jaw and back pain, increased heart rate, loss of appetite, indigestion, snoring, neck pain, slow concentration, weight gain, pain in upper back.
And as Jennifer walks through all of those symptoms, if you will, you can attribute those back to the muscular, respiratory, cardiovascular, endocrine, which manages our hormonal system. I heard somebody say, upset stomach, very nervous. So it affects us overall. We can have one of those symptoms or we can have many of those symptoms. And the problem is that stress is long-term or chronic. And when it becomes chronic, it continues to build up in our body without any type of release. So I'm going to give you a tool right now. So as you're going through your day and you start to feel that tenseness in your shoulders, feel a headache coming on, those butterflies are churning in your stomach, you're having a really difficult time, sleeping or processing what's going on, I encourage you to just try this mnemonic. It's called STOP. So the first thing that you're going to do at that very first recognition, you're going to stop what you're doing. Immediately just stop, turn to your breath. You're going to breathe in through your nose and just feel the air come down through the back of your throat and into your lungs. Observe how you're feeling. It could be, I am very stressed right now. I am angry. I am sad. That moment of breathing felt good. Whatever that is, just observe and then proceed with what you were doing. Now, this whole process can take maybe 3 to 5 seconds, and anybody standing around you is not going to recognize what it is that you're doing. So if you are in a heated conversation, for example, or you have a resident who is unhappy, you're trying to calm them down, just take this moment to stop. We'll talk about what does that do to our automated response. And when we do special types of breathing, and again, that's very key when we're doing mindfulness and through many of the other practices that I heard you call off, Jennifer, breathing and our breath work is a very integral part of that. And one of the most effective types of breathing is called diaphragmatic breathing. So I'd like us to try this together right now. So we're going to go ahead and just put one hand over our chest. And if you're comfortable, just let the other rest on your belly. And we're going to take a deep inhale through our nose. And as we do, we're going to feel our chest expand. Our diaphragm starts to contract and our belly expands, pushing that air down deep into our belly. And then we're going to exhale, letting that release through our nose as we feel our belly contract, our diaphragm relax, our chest relaxes, and the air just gently comes out of our nose. And what this does is it really encourages a full oxygen exchange. It brings in the incoming oxygen and pushes out outgoing carbon dioxide. So when you are trying that stop mnemonic, try to engage this type of diaphragmatic breathing. Again, a deep breath in through the nose, feeling the air move all the way down into your belly, and gently releasing, feeling the air move up through your chest and finally through your nose. So now I invite you to join me in a breathing exercise if you're comfortable. Again, this is experiential. So as we go through this exercise, I'm going to be asking you a series of questions just to guide you through, but not expecting anyone to answer. Again, this is an intrinsic exercise. So I encourage you to start with a posture that is straight and erect, but comfortable for you. And if it's safe for you to do so, you may close your eyes if you feel inclined. And we're going to start just by resting in the moment. I'm going to bring our awareness to our body, the wholeness of our body. And just notice the breath entering in and exiting. Just noting, where do you feel it coming in? Where do you feel it leaving? Try not to change your breath pattern, but just observe. Again, feeling the breath go in and out. Are your breaths of even length? Are they shallow? Inhale. Longer exhale. Now, if you can expand your awareness to any sound that you hear in the room, and just notice the sound. While you're noticing the sound and resting with your breath, if thoughts come in, just let them float by. Imagine a cloud drifting by on the wind. Does the sound change in any way? Again, bringing your awareness to your breath. Just feeling how it moves through your body. And we're going to prepare to end by taking a diaphragmatic breath in through our nose. Deep breath. Pushing air deep down into our belly and then relaxing, exhaling through our nose. Thank you for joining us in that. So, how does this thing called mindfulness work? Well, it can be used for immediate relief. So when we talk about we can sense that stress is coming up on our body, an intervention can help us reduce that stress and anxiety. So it can be an immediate factor. But if we do it on a regular or formal practice, such as yoga, meditation, meditative walks, those types of things, then it's more of a preventative. What this does is it actually starts to change our brain formation. It gives us physical and emotional and mental changes. Most often happen as a result. We find that we have a greater resiliency and that we have an increased ability to respond to challenges rather than to react. And that's a key component. It gives us that stopgap in between our emotional response and our thoughtful response. So some of the mechanisms of mindfulness are attention regulation. And I think if we are all being honest with ourselves right now, we're probably thinking, gosh, well, I'm taking this hour to set aside for myself. The emails are piling in. People are waiting outside of my door. I have this piling up or that piling up. I have these phone calls to make. And that is because we have become attuned to multitasking. But what studies are also showing is that multitasking actually shows that we are less effective. But what it's really doing to us is it's increasing our stress level, because we know that we can't be as effective as we are when we're focusing on one particular task. So mindfulness starts to get us back to what we were intended to do, which was to focus on one item at a time. So it really does help regulate our attention. And it helps us identify when our attention is wandering and how to bring it back. And that's key, I think, even for personal relationships. If you're in a conversation with your children or your family, and they're talking about something and you've retracted into your thoughts about what you have going on at work or another situation, the person that you're talking to knows that you're not present. This helps you identify that even faster so that you can be fully present and engaged in those conversations. Body awareness. Our body sends us very important keys about our health. If we're having constant headaches, does that mean something more than stress? If we are having stomach upset, does that mean something more than a nervous stomach? So it's about learning to key into our body and listen to what those messages are that our body is sending us. It helps really ground us by making us more aware of physical sensations, tingling in your toes, feeling the breath move down the back of your throat, how a pencil feels or a keyboard feels when you start typing on it. Just those very, very small physical elements really helps to start to ground you. It helps with emotion regulation, and we're going to talk a little bit more about distancing ourselves from emotions and how to help us with any type of reaction. Now, this is the key. So if I were to ask everybody on the chat right now to enter in, who is your worst critic? So we'll wait a moment for you to share that input. Who is your worst critic?
Teri, so far the overwhelming response is me, myself, self.
Yeah.
Me, myself, self.
Right. We're often so hard on ourselves. But if it were our friend or our loved one, would we be that hard on them? Would we judge them as harshly as we do ourselves? Mindfulness really helps us start to take away and step away from that need to judge ourselves. And it helps us learn to stay comfortable with uncomfortable emotions. So part of our emotional survival technique is really to avoid uncomfortable emotions, right? Grief, sadness, it's painful, it hurts. Many use distraction. My favorite place is called my denial den. I spend a lot of time there. But using mindfulness really helps us get in touch with our emotions, but learn more about how do we regulate them, and how do we have a relationship with those emotions. And not all stress is bad. It's having stress is really what helped us survive as a species. It helps us build our resilience. So when we talk about stress, we talk about, well, what happens to our body when it's under stress? Well, what happens is that our thalamus reacts. It bypasses the prefrontal cortex, which is the thinking brain, and the signal goes straight to the amygdala, which is kind of the primitive brain. That part of our brain only reacts on stored reactions. It only can access stored data. So think of it as your hard drive, right? It's going to, this is the trigger and this is the response. That's all it can do. It's not hitting our prefrontal cortex. So it will interpret something as being stressful. Your body is reacting to that. And then what's going to happen is that the amygdala then senses that you're in great danger. So it's going to flood your brain with biochemicals. And again, it's going to cause that automated response rather than a mindful response. This is also known as the fight, flight, or flee reaction. And this was very helpful to our ancestors as they were trying to outrun a saber-toothed tiger, but not so much to we humans, where, our true danger is a looming deadline, maybe a loved one who has health challenges, those types of things. But what do we do? What does our body do with all of those chemicals? The way that our bodies were designed is those chemicals were intended to power our big muscles so that we could run. Well, many of us, when we're feeling that stress, it's not that we're going to take off running. You can't run from a deadline. It's still going to be there, but we internalize that. And so all of those chemicals start to just hold up in our body, and there's no way for that to release. So what is the source of the perceived threat, though? If we know it's not a saber-toothed tiger, what is the source of that threat? Well, it's coming from us. We are the ones that are determining what is that threat. And most times that's coming from our thoughts. Now, certainly if you were driving maybe in traffic yesterday and you were by someone who spun out and they almost hit you, well then yes, that is a threat, and that was a very real physical threat. But most often that's not where our perceived threats are coming from. We're actually causing those perceived threats by our thoughts. So when we think of thoughts, we generally think of the past, and people will ruminate. Sometimes they'll think of past and they'll be reliving some wonderful times. But the majority of people, when they think about the past, it's either they're pulling up difficult or trying times, a situation, maybe they're trying to relive it so that the outcome was more in line with what they really wanted. So many times, people who continue to live in the past or think about the past, they're finding that there's a lot of depression associated with that. And with the future, sure, the future, could signify hope, could signify a lot of positive things. But for most people, when they're thinking about the future, it's with worry. It's with a cloud of worry around it. I wonder how I'm going to make my bills. I wonder if I'm going to get that job. I wonder if that account's going to work out. I wonder if what I said was the right thing to say. But if we're able to ground ourselves in the now, we don't have the past, we don't have the future, we only have this exact moment, right? And that's what mindfulness does. It really helps us cement and anchor us right in the moment and helps take us out of our mind. So when we think about the past and the future and a lot of the emotions associated with that, we do know that two of the most highly treated mental disorders now are depression and anxiety. And a lot of that is stemming from our thoughts. So just take a moment to take a look at this gorge here. And you see the water has really carved out hundreds and hundreds of feet of this very hard, dense rock. And that's really about what our neural pathways do. Once we have thought patterns that connect back and forth, those thought patterns become much stronger. And the more times you do them, the more times it becomes an automated response. So we have learned as humans what our stress reaction is going to be, usually at about age 5. Now, for some, your stress reactions may have lessened. For some, it has intensified. So again, when we talked before about what happens when we get stressed and that amygdala takes over and our prefrontal cortex or our thinking brain is not engaged, then this automated process comes into play. So if you think about a time that you were very stressed, you know, a lot of times people will attribute this to a traffic incident, you know, somebody cut you off and before you know it, you're yelling. But I think if we took a moment and just kind of thought back to how is it that what is your go-to response in any stressful situation? You know, if somebody is coming at you with anger, how do you respond? Do you recoil? Do you lash back out at them? If it's with sadness, do you hold their sadness? Does it physically impact you? We all have those go-to responses, but there's hope. So we can, through neuroplasticity, we can increase or create new reactions. So we can, through mindfulness, start to change the structure of our brain. And that sounds pretty amazing. And, you know, we might have some older folks on the call, and I often have people say, you know, you can't teach this old dog new tricks, but you can. And it's actually a physiological change that can occur. So what happens is through mindfulness and through meditation and other similar practices, it changes the structure of your brain. And through using many different scientific methods, such as functional MRI, scientists are really able to identify what parts of our brain are activated under stress, under calm, under peace, those types of things, and that they are able to identify, you know, pre-participants, what their brain looked like prior to doing meditation or mindfulness, and then post doing mindfulness after, you know, some time, could be 6 months, and they saw a true physical structure of the brain. It learns and adapts on a molecular level. And we can generate up to 6,000 new neurons a day. So just think of all of those, you know, neural pathways that we can connect. So even though if we have, you know, that deep gorge in there, we can start making another gorge so that when we're confronted with somebody who's angry, instead of lashing back out, maybe what we do is we're that person of calm. We're able to stand face to face with somebody who's angry and yelling at us, and we're able to kind of distance ourselves from that emotion. But how do we do that? Well, mindfulness really helps us focus on the process and not the content. So what is happening, not why. When we get into the why, we get involved in our own stories about why things are happening. Is it fair? We get into judgment. well, this happened. Maybe it happened because I did this or I did that, or I somehow was the cause of that. It also helps us be curious. Having a curious state of mind allows us, again, to kind of take a step back from that. It grounds us in our body. Just again, looking at what are those physical experiences that we are having. And that really helps us because it helps take us out of our thoughts. If I asked you, how did you arrive at where you were right now? Could you take me step by step? Well, I walked down the hallway, I opened up this door. I saw Patty and I waved hi to her. Could you go through and relive those steps, or did you just appear? Many of us take the same route back and forth to work every day. Do you remember the car that was alongside of you? Or did you notice a particular cloud formation in the sky or how the sun was shining? So be curious about those little details and cultivate an observer's point of view. And this is really where, folks can say, oh, this is just a little bit odd. I'm not asking you to go outside of your body, but what I'm asking you to do is kind of imagine yourself standing next to yourself. And as this experience is happening, identifying, well, what is happening to my body? I can see that I might be feeling angry, or I see that I'm getting a little bit nervous, but not on the why. Why am I getting nervous? Just on what it is happening. And this also helps to quiet our inner critic. So if we think about emotions in terms of a fire, if you're standing in the flames of a fire, you're getting burnt and you are in excruciating pain. Sometimes our emotions can feel that way. But if we step back and we distance ourselves, even just a foot from that fire, then we start to notice the beauty of the fire. We start to experience the warmth of it. Starts to warm our cold hands. Then we might notice the crackle, and maybe even the hiss if the wood is a little bit wet. And then as we look closely, we might start to see the smoke tendrils drifting away. And then we might start to smell the smell of a campfire. And that might transport us back to times when we were children or camping with our friends and our family. So being able to take that distance, that step back, really allows us to start to cultivate that curious state of mind. But all of this begins with the heart. We think of our heart as something that controls our blood pressure. It's just an organ in our body. But research through the Heart Math Institute and many other scientific institutes are showing that the physical heart actually has an information center, and that many times we think a thought is going to tell us how our heart is going to feel. If we think a sad thought, we feel an emotion of sadness here. But the heart actually has its own central nervous system, and it connects and speaks directly to the brain. And when we think about the strongest emotions that we feel, where do we feel them in our body? If we think about love and joy and even sadness, there's kind of this central feeling right across your chest area that's why. If you can look on the display there and you can see the electromagnetic field that your heart puts out, it extends well beyond your body. And that is part of the communication system, not only to your own brain and your own central nervous system, but to others that are around you. If you've been around somebody and maybe you don't even have a deep connection with them, but you go up to them and you just sense their sadness, or you feel you're standing in line behind somebody who's so agitated because the line is moving slow, And before you know it, you too start to get a little bit antsy, a little bit agitated, a little bit anxious. A lot of this is because this is what's generating out of our heart system here. So bringing awareness to this center part of our body helps us again start to give ourselves some love and compassion, and helps to start bringing us into a type of cohesiveness between our heart and our brain. So now I'd like if you could join me in another exercise. Again, just sitting comfortably in your chair. And if you're comfortable, close your eyes. Now, if you can just focus your attention in the area of your heart. Again, maybe recalling the picture where we saw the heart as a bright color with the electromagnetic waves extending beyond the heart, beyond the physical body. Just bring your attention there. Might start to notice a particular warmth. Just be curious about what you're experiencing. Is it a tingling? Maybe a vibration? And now I want you to bring your awareness to your head. And just hold your awareness there. Noticing if you could soften your forehead just a little. Let your eyelids become just a little more heavy. And notice any sensations that you have around your head. And now envision the light from your head moving down into your chest area, a nice warm glow, getting brighter as your breath moves in and out. Again, noticing any sensations that you might feel. And now I want you to bring to mind a particular feeling of love or hope or gratitude. If you can recall your happiest moment, a moment you felt the most love or love for others. And just feel that grow in your heart. And generate that sense of coherence between your heart and your mind. See if you can feel any physical sensation between the heart connecting and your mind receiving. Again, just feeling that sense of joy and love move through you as you breathe in and out. And now we're going to prepare to return to the room by taking a deep breath in through our nose. And we're going to exhale through our mouth, wiggling our toes and our fingers to bring us back into this moment. So if I asked anybody, if I asked you, who are you most compassionate to? Unlike the chat where we said we're our own worst critic, I don't think any one of us would answer that we're most compassionate to ourselves. But in being compassionate to ourselves, studies have proven that this results in our ability and our capacity to care for others. If we think about our golden rule, if our friend, our best friend, or our child, or our parent, or somebody, sibling, somebody that we deeply, deeply love, came to us and said, I've made a mistake, I've done this, you're likely not going to launch into, yelling at them or berating them or telling them how foolish they were or how thoughtless they were. But to our own selves, that's what we do. Start to pay attention to your own inner dialogue. And maybe if you identify a mistake, that's okay. You've made a mistake, you've learned from that mistake, and you're ready to move on. Think about our soldiers going into battle. Do you think that they would much rather have an ally with them or an enemy? I'm sure you all answered ally. And we have the ability to be our own ally. If we can tell ourselves that we're foolish for doing something, we can tell ourselves we were kind for doing what we did. We just changed the dialogue. We've made it up. We can re-script that. So when we talk about self-compassion, the three elements are self-kindness, common humanity, and mindfulness. So again, mindfulness is this underlying component to, again, yoga, meditation. But what transpires out of that is a love for ourselves and for other humanity. Now, self-compassion is not self-esteem, and some people feel that self-compassion is selfish. If I go and I get a massage, well, that's going to be selfish. Well, that's also self-care, and that's important. It helps renew you so that you can continue to care for others. But self-compassion is not self-esteem. The primary difference is that self-esteem requires you to be in judgment of yourself or others. So self-esteem is established by feeling better or performing better than someone else. The problem with self-esteem is that we can't be better than every single person out there. So there comes a time when we are not going to be the best at something, and that's okay. And that is how it should be. But if we're relying on self-esteem to make ourselves feel good, to make our children feel good, then what we could do is change that to self-compassion. You know what? I didn't win the race because I wasn't the fastest. Tommy was the fastest. But that's okay. I did my best. That's self-compassion. So we're going to go ahead and end with a self-compassion exercise. So again, if you could just get comfortable in your chair and take a deep breath in and release out through your mouth. And take a moment to recall the warmth of your heart center, that glowing sensation. And many times when we're feeling badly, or someone around us is feeling badly, we have the sensation to touch. Of course, with COVID, we have not been able to do that. But what I found in the very early days of the pandemic was so many people putting their hand over their heart. And this was almost an intrinsic response, because when we put our hand over our heart, there have been scientific studies that show that it actually changes our oxytocin and some of our other chemicals to comfort us. So if you are comfortable, I'd like you to join me in this. So if you can start by putting your hand on your heart, just take a deep breath in and out. A deep breath in and out. I want you to think back to when we began today, and I asked you what your stress level was. And I want you to bring to mind what the situation or cause of your stress was. There'd be a looming deadline, a disagreement with a coworker, whatever that was that caused you to give your rating number higher than 1, and just bring that to mind. Again, just feeling your breath moving in and out. And knowing that by holding your hand on your heart, that you're changing the dynamic of your energy system by impacting the field. And as you recall those moments that made you feel tense, I want you to start to think about some words of kindness that you can tell yourself, such as, "It's okay. I am well. I am safe. I am peace." And just hold that space for just a moment, knowing that within you, you can transform those moments of stress just with this very simple technique, placing your hand over your heart, becoming mindful and rooted in the moment, and using self-kindness and compassion. We're going to take one final diaphragmatic breath in through our nose and releasing it as you feel your belly soften and letting the air just drift out. I want to thank you all for participating today. And now I would like to open it up to questions.
Feel free to go ahead and unmute yourselves or enter your questions in the chat room, and our facilitator, Jennifer, will help guide those questions.
Good afternoon here. I have a question.
Sure.
Dana Dooley here from Neighborhood Legal Services. I was wondering, do you know of any providers of mindfulness services that are covered by insurance?
That's a very good question. There are some mindfulness, if you go to mindful.org, they have a directory of certified mindfulness teachers. I don't know, there may be some in the Ann Arbor area. I'm not really sure in our area specific to Livonia, how many providers there are. But I can certainly pull together some other resources for that as well.
Thank you.
Any other questions today?
Teri, do you also teach yoga? Is another question coming in.
No, I do not.
Do you have some tips for reminding ourselves to stay present and mindful?
I do. I think that just having the awareness is the first step. So if we get to point B and we don't remember how we got there, then it means that we were living 50% of our time, according to a Harvard Medical Research Guide, shows that we're spending 50% of our time in our thoughts, right? So that's 50% of our life that is just kind of whipping by. And by doing that, then we're not able to engage in a lot of the moments, such as joyful moments, and really be fully present for those. So I think the first step is just as you soon identify that you've been in your thoughts, then stopping, bringing yourself to your breath. That's always a very good anchoring. For some people, bringing to the breath might be a little anxious because maybe they might have a breathing condition and that kind of exasperates maybe some anxiety. So then just focus on any sensation, engage your sensory. What can you smell? What can you touch? What do you see with your eyes? It could be even just walking out to your car. You know, when you're walking out, instead of thinking about getting to your car and running to do your grocery shopping, notice, what does the snow feel like under your feet? Do you hear the snow crunch? It's those very, very little things, feeling the wind on your face.
Teri, we have a person who raised their hand, Octavia. So Octavia, go ahead and unmute yourself and ask your question.
Yes, again, good afternoon, everyone, and thank you. I was going to ask, I know you mentioned about multitasking and how if we're multitasking, we don't do 100% of the job or the task that we're seeking to do. But, right now, multitasking is almost second nature.
It
So
is.
I I'm trying to understand that portion that you're saying. So how can you get out of multitasking when you have so many different tasks to do? So that's probably my question.
I think probably one of the most important things that I found out is there's always one thing that's more important than the other. So I will take what's right in front of me and try to focus on that single thing. And this is a change in mindset, but not something that's going to happen overnight. It's going to happen in very bite-sized pieces. So it could even just be when you're eating dinner tonight, you know, instead of eating dinner and watching a movie and checking your email, maybe just decide you're going to put your phone down and not check your email. Maybe instead just focusing on the taste of your food as you take a bite. Notice the texture, notice the heat, the sensation. Just trying to put yourself in that very physical moment. And by doing that, then you'll start to notice a freedom. You'll start to feel much airier around you. Your brain capacity actually starts to loosen up a little bit and gives you more room to think and be effective. When we're so tight and constricted in something that we're doing, it's very difficult to think of creative ideas and different things because we're so stuck in a particular pattern.
I would also add that as we do our jobs with residents, and pardon me for saying this, you got to turn the damn TV off so that they can hear the conversation, they can engage in the group, they don't have those outside sounds. You know, I don't mean to be disrespectful when I say that, but a TV after a while becomes a babysitter that we as staff don't even hear it anymore. And then consequently, we want them to focus and we don't even realize we're part of the problem.
That's a very good point, Marty.
Teri, there's a couple of requests in the chat. If we could go back to the stop slide.
Sure. So the stop is very, very easy. Oops, go back this way. So it's just stop what you're doing as soon as you notice that you're not present or that you notice that your stress is starting to come up. Stop what you're doing. Turn to your breath. Again, focusing on that physical sensation of the air coming in, going back through the back of your breath. The more that you can tie into the senses, the more effective it's going to be. Observe how you're feeling. Again, just labeling it, not why you're feeling it, but I'm feeling stressed. But don't judge you for feeling stressed. Just acknowledge I'm feeling stressed. And then proceed with what you're doing. By doing that, you actually stop that automated response and you start to create more neural pathways that gives you a more the ability to have a more mindful response. Are there any other questions?
There were some just comments saying, agreeing like how we're always kind of harsh on ourselves and we're our own self-critics and that we kind of need that self-compassion. That seems to be a nutshell in some of the comments.
So there are a lot of resources. I think V is going to be sending that out with the note. There's many apps that you can use that either give you guided meditations. There's many different websites, a lot of different readings. There's several publications. Mindfulness is really expanding as they identify, you know, the physical and emotional and spiritual benefits of practicing mindfulness. So to all of you, I want to thank you for spending this time for yourself. Tara, I don't know if I put her on here, but Tara Brock, if you're, you know, recognizing that, you know, you are pretty critical on yourself, I would definitely recommend looking up. It's Tara Brock, TaraBrach, and she really focuses on self-kindness and mindfulness. And I think that we'd all be surprised if we stop to listen to ourselves, that inner dialogue, just how cruel it can be sometimes. So I encourage you to put aside your inner critic, bring out your ally, bring out your best friend, and be kind to yourself, okay? So peace to all of you.
Thank you, Teri. Again, wow. I don't know if all of you felt it, but I could feel that sense of need of finding my inner being, my inner centeredness, my inner calm. And I did that. So I want to thank you for giving me that 1 hour today to really refocus and recenter myself. So I hope all of you enjoyed it. I think this is things that we can walk away from and utilize on a daily basis. As Teri said, she'll be providing us a resource page, which I'll be emailing tomorrow as I get all the other flyers from our networking group. So look out for that. And with that, we will then open up to open forum. So if any of you would like to start in the networking, sharing your information, go ahead one at a time.